It's about getting the leaders and leadership team typically to step back first and look at what drives them, using those pillars of purpose, autonomy, mastery you mentioned. How do you try and reconnect with those things as a leadership team? And once that's clear and it links to where the organization is going, how do you then create the conditions for that to be spread, and also for you to create great relationships and role modeling for that to translate across the organization?
I've got two questions there. What's the easiest part for teams, for these senior leadership teams to activate, put into place? And what's the most difficult? Like, what's the biggest bridge that these leaders have to cross over?
So I think some of the work around mastery can be some relatively easy to put in place, because that's about getting better each day. This idea that every day we're seeing progress and getting better. And so there's a lot of work around continuous improvement we can create, where the first thing is really creating a feedback culture where you don't wait for the end of the year appraisal, that you
Right.
really create a culture where informal, rapid feedback is valued, and the idea that feedback is a gift that can be created very powerfully. What I've seen some of the best organizations do, and I've helped them do it, is to sort of build in not just technical mastery improvement, but also non-technical or human mastery. So how do you have conversations? How do you mentor someone? How do you communicate in difficult situations? How do you handle a challenging conversation? Building that in very explicitly. It's that kind of part of a mastery map of what an organization wants to do. So that's probably the most, it's not to say easy, but it's the one that is very tangible. And yeah, and you can build that. And I think many teams like it. I think a lot of next gen also really want that feedback culture to be quicker. They're used to that, rather than waiting for months or even the end of a year for that sort of thing to happen. So yeah, that's one thing that goes well. I think on the purpose question, what my work has really made me think about is sort of two types of purpose. That's probably the most challenging element.
Hmm.
There's a kind of what I call now a big P purpose, which is about a wider problem that you can see your work contributing to. So I've been doing some work, for example, with one of the biggest restaurant groups in the UK recently, and there's a big element of this idea of creating a transportative experience for someone. You go to one, they've got restaurants that are, Indian, they've got restaurants that are Iranian, you name it, Taiwanese, etc. It's one of the most
Yep.
diverse groups in the world. But when you step into the restaurant, you need to feel like you're in Taiwan or
Hmm.
Taipei or in Tehran or wherever it might be. That idea of making that kind of a North Star and feeling that if we want to be really deeply authentic and transportative in what we do, let's build a whole company around that concept.
Hmm.
So I think of that as the big P purpose piece, but the small P, is really about helping, in that case, that idea of a guest promise, that every time a guest comes into one of our restaurants, they know they feel a deep connection to the staff. It's caring. There's a real sense of welcoming them, making them feel really that they're special people because they're coming into almost into our home.
Hmm.
That's a small P purpose piece. And so weaving big P purpose and small P purpose into an organization, initially through the leadership, it's a bit more complex, but once that happens, it can be incredibly powerful for an organization overall.
And so what's coming up for me with that is just the congruence of that big P and little p purpose. And I believe, like, I wonder if that's what this next generation, they can detect that incongruence in
Mm.
organizations.
Yeah, I love that point. I think of, I was writing my second book, I try and learn a lot about the idea of almost like a gin and tonic. The big P is like the gin and the small P like the tonic, where you need a lot of, that big vision, that big piece is important, and something that really is an exciting North Star for the whole organization, especially younger members of the workforce, to galvanize behind and
Yeah.
feel is really true. But you can have all these great statements, but actually, if each day and every day we don't actually manifest that in a very practical way, that's where that incongruence can really show
Yeah.
up and be there. So I think my thinking has really evolved on the purpose point, that actually there are two types of purposes, big P and small P, and it's about that sort of gin and tonic where you're trying to bring both together and make it a really powerful cocktail from the combination of the two.
And depending on the organization too, you might have different amounts of the gin and the tonic, but you need both to make the flavor.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's a very
Yeah.
nice way of looking at it actually as well. So there's no like specific recipe. It depends on the context, but both elements are really important, and they don't work without each other to complement them.